Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're dissecting the anatomy of a biotech crash, specifically the sudden and catastrophic stock collapse of Tenax Therapeutics. We're going to really dig into the brutal binary realities of pre-revenue biotech investing. You know, that wild world where massive fortunes are either made or just completely wiped out based on the results of a single scientific test. So let's unpack exactly what happened, why the market reacted so violently, and figure out what the path forward actually looks like based on the data. It's a bit of a medical and financial mystery, and we're going to solve it together.
Okay, let's kick things off with a truly staggering number. 80%. We are talking about an 80% overnight wipeout in pre-market trading. Just imagine that for a second. In a matter of hours, before the opening bell even rang, 80% of this company's entire market value was completely decimated. Poof, erased. This wasn't some slow, agonizing decline over months of bad earnings reports. No, this was an absolute cliff dive.
And this really perfectly illustrates the sheer narrative whiplash investors experienced over a single weekend. The stock closed on Friday at a very healthy $13.44 a share. But by Monday morning, in pre-market trading, that price had absolutely crashed down to a shocking $2.07. It is the textbook definition of a catastrophic gap down. Now, to understand how a company loses nearly its entire value in just a matter of hours, we really need to look at the underlying science and the towering expectations that were built into that Friday price tab.
So who exactly is Tenax Therapeutics? Well, they trade under the ticker TENX, and they're what we call a development stage pharmaceutical company. Now, as you probably know, this is a crucial distinction in the investing world. It means they don't have a big portfolio of approved drugs generating steady, predictable revenue. Instead, their entire valuation, really their entire existence, is heavily reliant on successfully developing and getting approval for new therapies. It's kind of like spending years building an incredibly expensive, state-of-the-art factory for a single product that might ultimately be illegal to sell. They were facing the ultimate binary event, a situation where the outcome is basically a 0 or a 1, a total failure or an incredible success.
Let's get into the core of the medical science here, because this was the focus of all the hype. Their main asset, the drug that literally everything hinged on, was TNX 103. This is an oral formulation of a drug called levosimendan. It was intended to treat a very specific, incredibly complex cardiac and pulmonary condition known as pulmonary hypertension associated with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. I know that is a total mouthful, so we're just going to call it PH-HFpEF for short. It's a really severe condition with very difficult dynamics for the patients suffering from it.
The reason the market was so completely obsessed with TNX 103 comes down to the incredibly high stakes involved. They were targeting a vast addressable market that currently has absolutely zero approved therapies. Think about that for a second. Zero. No approved treatments exist anywhere for this specific patient population. So, for the patients, it meant incredibly high stakes for their health and their day-to-day quality of life. And for investors, well, it set the stage for a massive, massive payday if Tenax could manage to be the first company to actually cross that finish line.
And that soaring potential led to a wildly, overwhelmingly bullish setup from top analyst firms across Wall Street. Just look at the consensus we had here: Chardon, Guggenheim, Piper Sandler, Canaccord, and Evercore. All of these major players had initiated coverage on Tenax with glowing buy or outperform ratings. The consensus wasn't just strong, it was practically euphoric. And their price targets were super aggressive, ranging all the way from $35 up to $50 a share. Remember, this stock ultimately crashed to $2. It's incredibly ironic in hindsight for sure, but it really shows you just how high of a pedestal this company had been placed on.
Now, the market's confidence wasn't just blind faith. It was sky high largely because of earlier Phase 2 promise and heavily bolstered by the company's own confirmation regarding their Phase 3 trial. They stated the trial was powered at well over 90% to detect a 25-meter change in the primary endpoint. In clinical trial terms, being powered at over 90% means they were statistically highly confident that if the drug worked, their study was robust enough to catch a significant 25-meter improvement in how far these patients could walk.
They were so incredibly confident in a successful outcome that they started preparing for victory well in advance. They built out significant infrastructure, including bringing on a chief commercial officer to lay the groundwork for a potential commercial launch. On top of that, they secured a substantial cash runway to fund their operations all the way into 2028. This whole setup created a total pressure cooker environment of sky-high expectations. They were dressed and ready for a party that, unfortunately, was about to be abruptly canceled.
Because, in a classic, incredibly painful case of biotech binary risk, Monday arrived, and Tenax announced the top-line results from their Phase 3 LEVEL clinical trial. The news? An absolute devastating failure. The trial just did not achieve what it set out to do. And all the sky-high expectations we were just talking about, they were shattered in an instant. The crux of the failure really lies right here in the primary endpoint. The goal of the trial was to measure the change in the 6-minute walk distance at week 12 compared to a placebo. Remember that expected 25-meter improvement they said they were powered for? Well, the actual result was a meager 3.5-meter difference. And worse, the p-value was 0.63. As you probably know, a p-value of 0.63 is nowhere near statistically significant. It essentially means this tiny 3.5-meter difference could very easily just be random chance. Basically, it's just noise in the data.
And to add insult to injury, the drug also completely missed its secondary goals. The trial failed its key secondary endpoint, which was meant to measure quality of life improvements. So it didn't help them walk significantly further, and it didn't significantly improve how they actually felt day to day. It was a double failure on the main objectives of the study. And that's particularly heartbreaking when you remember we're talking about real people suffering from a severe condition who were desperately hoping for a breakthrough. What you really should take away from this is a true masterclass in the binary nature of development-stage biotech investing. This is the quintessential binary biotech trap. When a pre-revenue company hinges literally everything on a single, pivotal trial readout, it is truly all or nothing. The market aggressively prices in the probability of success, and when the data fails to support that narrative, the floor just falls out completely. It's all or nothing, and for Tenax, on that Monday morning, it unfortunately became nothing.
But hold on a second. If you look closely at the data, the story isn't entirely over. Sifting through the ashes of this devastated trial, the company is actually pointing to a silver lining. And this lifeline is hidden deep within what are called pre-specified subgroup analyses. Basically, this means that before the trial even began, they drew a line in the sand and agreed to look at specific subsets of patients just to see if the drug worked better for certain types of people. Check this out. While the overall trial saw that disastrous, statistically insignificant 3.5-meter result, diving into those subgroups paints a wildly different picture. For patients with a baseline walk distance below the trial median of 333 meters, meaning the patients who were sicker and had a much greater disease burden at the start, they saw a plus 26.3-meter improvement. And patients aged 71 and older, they saw a plus 27.1-meter improvement. Suddenly, in these highly specific, sicker groups, we're seeing the exact kinds of numbers they originally hoped for across the board. Furthermore, beyond just the walking distance, the drug produced a striking 49% reduction in something called NT-proBNP. Now, this is a key measure of cardiac wall stress, and a 49% reduction is highly notable. It strongly suggests that the drug is in fact biologically active and potentially disease-modifying. It just might be that it only works for the right, sicker patient population rather than the broad, general group they tested initially. So armed with this highly specific subgroup data, Tenax isn't throwing in the towel just yet. Their immediate next steps are very targeted. First up, they intend to request a Type C meeting with the FDA, which is essentially a formal sit-down to ask regulators for guidance and permission to change course. Second, their goal in that meeting is to present this very subgroup data showing the drug's efficacy in those sicker patients. And third, they want to discuss revising their development program to focus exclusively on that targeted group for their ongoing global Level 2 trial. The landscape has completely shifted here. Those $35 price targets and all those glowing strong buy analyst ratings, yeah, those are officially history. This company has gone from being a massive market darling to being in a highly vulnerable, pre-revenue fight for pure survival. Thankfully for them, they do still have that substantial cash runway we mentioned earlier to keep operations going. But make no mistake, their entire future now rests on one single thing: what the FDA decides when they see this new proposed plan. As we await this FDA catalyst, which is absolutely going to be the ultimate deciding factor, we really have to ask ourselves a compelling question based on the data we've reviewed today. Are we looking at the final days of a failed experiment where the overall data just couldn't support the hype? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a remarkable comeback and a truly brilliant strategic pivot for Tenax Therapeutics? Only the FDA and time will tell. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. I really hope you found this breakdown as absolutely fascinating as I did.